Well, hello there, Monstars. Welcome to our next flip video. In this flip video, we are representing data with a bar graph. Sometimes when I say data, you might hear other people say data. It's the same thing, it's just a different way of saying it. So we're going to be looking at sets of data, and we're going to take that information and we're going to put it into a bar graph. Now, we had our pretest on this last week, and I saw that some of you have a pretty good understanding of bar graphs, so looks like it's going to be a review for some of you. If it is hard, don't worry. We're going to go over it, and we're going to work on it in class so that we can master this concept. So our I can statement is, I can represent a set of data in a bar graph. So we're going to take a data set, and we are going to take this information and put it into a bar graph. Now, some information that we need to be aware of when we're making a bar graph, there are many, many parts to the bar graph. It's not like when you are doing an addition problem and you have a sum and that's your answer. There are several steps that we'll go through. When we make a bar graph, we need to make sure that we have a y-axis, which is this line right here. It's called a y-axis. We need to make sure we have an x-axis, which is this horizontal line down here. We need to make sure that we're using a data set, which is our values. We are going to plug in our data sets. Like, for example, this data set says that we're looking at student grades, and we had 4 students receive an A, 12 students receive a B, 10 receive a C, and 2 receive a D. And then we've taken those grades, we've marked them down here. This is the title, the label of our x-axis. We have A's right here, and it goes up 4 units to represent 4 students who received an A. And B's, we have 12 students who received a B. C's, we have 10 students who received a C. And D's, we had 2 students receive a D. And this number, the number of students, is represented by how many units we increase vertically on our bar graph. So we have multiple areas that we need to include in our bar graph when we are making a bar graph. So let's see what that's going to look like. On our next slide, I'm going to give you a set of data, and I am going to give you 3 lunch choices and the amount of students who have made that lunch choice, and we're going to take that data set and we're going to put it into a bar graph. So I want you to do this with me on your whisk as you're going through the next slide. All right, on this slide, we already have our y-axis. It's written right, it's right here, the vertical. I always remember that this is the y-axis because I know that I'm going to go up to the sky. I'm going to go vertical. Sky has a y in it, and it helps you remember that this is the y-axis. And this is my horizontal axis, which is my x-axis. Now, you don't have to label those when you're making your bar graph. I'm just doing that for our first flip video to remind us. We already have our data set given. And now what we need to do is we need to represent the fact that we have 5 students choosing pizza on our bar graph. So are we going to put pizza listed on our y-axis, or are we going to list it on our x-axis, or horizontal axis? Yeah, we're going to put pizza on our x-axis. We're going to show pizza, the pizza choice, on our x-axis. What's our next choice that people could have chose for lunch? Yeah, we had tacos was our next choice. I'm going to separate that with a line. And what's our final choice that students could select? Yeah, it was hamburgers. I'm kind of running out of space for hamburgers, so I'm just going to put HB for hamburgers. I'm going to abbreviate it that way. And this is our lunch choices. That's the label. That's what I'm showing, representing on my x-axis. What am I going to put on my y-axis? Yeah, on my y-axis is going to go the number of students making that choice. So my label is number of students. If I look at my data set, I see that the smallest number is 3, my largest number is 8. So my access needs, or my number of students needs to at least be to 8. That can be my greatest, can be 8 students. At the very beginning of my axis here, which really turns into a number line, we always start with 0, right? What's halfway between 0 and 8? Just like if we were making our number line, yeah, it's 4. So now I'm going to fill in the blanks on my number line. I know that half of 0 and 4 is 2. Halfway between 4 and 8 is 6. And this is going to help me, just like when we were doing fractions, make equal, as best as I can, make equal units. All right, now I need to show that I have 5 students choosing pizza. Well, one thing that I like to do on my bar graphs before I even get started is I like to turn my bar graph into a grid, because sometimes it's hard if you're looking at one and like say hamburgers 3 that I have to kind of track with my eyes all the way across and then make my bar. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is I'm going to encourage you to make your bar graph into a grid, just like when we did our Build-A-Town and we used our grid paper. We're going to draw that all the way across. And how many choices did I have? I had 3 choices. So I'm going to split my grid into 3 sections. Now I have a grid that's easier for me to work with and easier for me to shade in. So let's start with pizza. I had 5 students choose pizza. So I'm going to, on my y-axis, I'm going to go to where my 5 is, my 5th unit. I'm going to draw a cross, and then I'm going to make my bar that represents pizza, and I'm going to shade it completely in, because this shows that I have 5 students made the lunch choice of pizza. How many students chose tacos? You're right, we had 8 students, so we're going to go along our y-axis until we get to 8, which is all the way at the top. Draw a horizontal line, and then I'm going to make my bar, shade in my bar completely to show that I had 8 students choose tacos. What was my final choice? Yeah, it was hamburgers. And how many students chose hamburgers? I had 3. So again, I'm going to go to my 3 on my y-axis. I'm going to go over vertically. I already have this grid drawn in, so it's a little bit easier for me to find my way. And I'm going to go up to my 3rd line, draw my horizontal line, and then complete my bar. And when I'm finished, I have a complete bar graph. So I took my data set and I now have represented it into a complete bar graph. Okay, and can you identify the one piece of our bar graph that I'm missing? Remember from the previous slide we talked about that we had to have a data set and we had to represent that data set. We had labels and we had an y-axis and an x-axis. But what am I missing? Yeah, if you set a title to my graph, you are completely right. We are missing a title. You always have to title your graph. And I'm going to title this graph Student Lunch Choices, because that's what this bar graph represents. All right, on this slide, I've given you lunch choices again, new lunch choices and new values. We have chicken nuggets. We had 8 students choose chicken nuggets, 4 students chose rotini, and we had 12 students that were doing a cold lunch. I've given you your y-axis and I've given you your x-axis. I want you to try on your whisk to take this data set and turn it into a bar graph to represent this information. So I want you to hit pause Push play when you're ready. I want to see how you did with your bar graph. Okay, let's see how you did. So your bar graph should look something similar to this. You notice that your grid got a little bit smaller because you added more values in. Instead of going to 8 like our last graph did, we're going all the way to 12. So when you looked at chicken nuggets, you saw that you had 8 students choose chicken nuggets. So your bar for chicken nuggets went to the value of 8. And then you shaded that in completely. For rotini, we had 4 students choose rotini. So we went to our 4th value and we shaded in 4 to represent 4 students who chose rotini. And then for our cold lunch, we had 12 students choose cold lunch, and that was our highest value. So we shade in the bar all the way to the 12. Now, don't forget that you need a title and you need labels for your y-axis and your x-axis. So let's start with our y-axis. What do these values represent? They represent the number of students that made that choice. And then on our x-axis, what do these choices represent? You're right. These are the lunch choices. And then what about our entire bar graph? What's the title for our entire bar graph? Yeah, it's student lunch choices. Make sure you have all parts of your bar graph on your whisk. Okay, so we're gonna finish our whisk with a riddle, not a joke this time. Make sure you bring your whisk in complete with a full summary. Remember, a full summary is not one sentence. A full summary of the video is what we did during our video. Also, any questions that you may have for me or for a classmate, maybe you want to give your classmate a set of data and ask if they can make a bar graph representing that data set. So here's your riddle. What is harder to catch the faster you run? The faster you run, it's harder to catch. What could it be? All right, friends, your whisk is due on Wednesday, and I will see you then. Have a great night.